Perfect timing. We are just so thrilled all of you could join us. There's just a little competition down the way, a little somebody. So if some of you didn't get in there, we're happy to have you.
Amen. Amen.
There it is. Laysha, I've actually known for at least 25 years through her work at Target in the space of, before it was called one thing, it was about making sure that everyone was included and everyone had space at the table. And those people who had space at the table all were merit-oriented.
Amen.
I just want to get that kind of
out there.
Right out there.
Out there.
But she's a recent retiree.
I am. After nearly 33 years.
Give her a clap.
At Target.
A hoo hoo hoo.
Yeah. After nearly 33 years, I retired about a year ago. And I recall when I first joined the company, it was a $9 billion brand. And by the time I left, it was over $100 billion. And so I've seen tremendous growth and lots of cycles, highs and low. I've learned a lot, also contributed a lot. And what I love about this season of my life, with intention, I designed this so that while I was, and my husband, Bill, who's here, a little shout out to
love Bill.
We just had our wedding anniversary last week, so 27 years married and 34 years together. And
the whole time at Target.
Yeah,
plus
the whole time, right? But we designed it so that while we were relatively young and relatively healthy, we could continue to do other things that were important to us and that were aligned with our shared purpose. And so it's a gift to have been able to have that incredible career, but it's about, as I talk about in my book, Lead Like You Mean It, it's about a holistic approach to your life and career. And so it's great to be in this season where we can still do things that we're capable of doing and have breath to do and have passion to do while we have the right health, physically, mentally, spiritually to do it.
So leading and meaning it, I just like, the elephant in the room, a lot happened after you left the company.
Yes.
Just a little bit. And I'm just curious, it's not just Target that was in a bullseye from several different aspects of the spectrum, but the DEI space, the space to lean into community, the space to lean into inclusivity, that was your space, and now it's being disrupted. I'm curious your thoughts on it.
Yeah, and throughout those 33 years, I did lots of things in the company, right? So started out in our stores organization, did corporate social responsibility, stakeholder engagement, and was on the executive team, right? So the C-suite, which means I reported into the CEO, and the main job at that point is looking at overall company strategy, right? How do you really help the company perform? But a big part of my work throughout that time was making sure that there were more seats at the table, that we could grow the brand, leveraging the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because our consumer base was very diverse, our employee base was, our vendor and partner base, and the communities in which we operated were quite diverse as well. And so regardless of my job title, I considered it my business to ensure that we were creating an equitable space, a space that had a sense of belonging, so that we could leverage that as a strategic competitive advantage. It was just good business, right? Moral imperative aside, to me, in my fiduciary role as a C-suite leader, I saw it as an opportunity to grow and sustain the business that also could be done fairly and equitably and ideally in a way that could be sustained and create, quite frankly, seats at the table that were hard for me to even get, if I'm being honest. And so to see the pullback in all sectors, government, the nonprofit sector, business, public and private, is something that frustrates me, makes me angry, but also makes me more committed and resolved to continue to show up and do the work, because I still believe it offers a strategic competitive advantage. And I also believe that organizations that lean into it and leverage diversity, equity, inclusion will over time perform better, deliver better results for all of their key stakeholders, their customers, their employees, the communities and partners in which they do that work with and through, and ultimately for shareholders. Again, I just think it makes great sense. I would also say that I think talent is equally distributed, but opportunity still is not. It isn't. And so it is, I think, important, particularly as you're leading with meaning, to not only think about ways in which you champion and sustain yourself, but what are you also then doing to lift up others? And in doing so, making all of us rise as a result. And I have seen through my work, whether it's through the employees that I have helped recruit, retain, advance, promote, or the organizations I've partnered with, the vendors who we've then brought in to the company that meet a consumer need and help a segment grow, to the communities in which we operated and opened up the business that perhaps were food deserts or had no other place to go to get affordable, well-designed product. So, that was a season that I did that work in, and, a year after I left to see, again, the pullback across all sectors, for me, takes me back to a mentor that you'll read about in the book, and that's Mrs. Coretta Scott King, who was a tremendous leader in her own right, also the wife of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I recall as she mentored me many, many years ago, and I don't fangirl a lot, but I fangirled around her, right? And my husband would tell you, I'm not one to get starstruck. I'm all about business, right? I wanted to prove I was the big girl in the room and I could get the job done, so I was very focused. But around her, I was a little girl, right? I was the little, I'm tearing up, right?
Yeah.
Just amazed by her,
Yeah.
her strength, her grace. And so I was blessed to do a project with her through work, and at the end of this successful project, I had the courage to ask her if she'd be willing to be a mentor. And gosh, she's so busy, civil rights icon, she's gonna say no, but she said yes. And I'm the beneficiary of that, and I just try to pay that forward. And so many lessons she dropped, but one, I used to say, gosh, if I were alive during the civil rights movement, or all the different sort of stages of life that you had fought through and lived through, what would I have done? And she'd say, Laysha, it doesn't matter what you would have done then. It only matters what you're doing now. And I was like, nah, the fight continues, the work continues. And whether that's through your career or in your personal life, there are so many opportunities for you to make a difference, to be a role model, to have an impact, to continue to pave the path that, based on what you tell me you'd like to do to be of service, will not only make your life better, it'll be hard, but in fact, many of the things that you will do will likely be things that you won't benefit from. That's where you'll really be pushed. How uncomfortable are you willing to get in service of your purpose? Will you still do the work if the beneficiaries of that work are not you? You may not be the one that gets into the C-suite.
Right.
It may be the generation behind you or the generation behind them. But if that is a part of your purpose of being of service, creating more opportunities for others, then that's what the work requires. And so it just was a gift that, like many other gifts and gems that she'd drop very sort of casually, matter-of-factly and casually and move on. I was like, okay, that was genius. But it stuck with me. And in this moment of uncertainty, I come back to that. Am I willing to continue to do the work? And I am. But having clarity around what your purpose is, which I talk quite a lot about in the book, helps.
But purpose, it's funny, you should, just like you segue perfectly into getting into the moment of who you are and define. In fact, you say, as much as you change, you are always you. And the truth of who you are and showing up as you are is part of the meaning.
Yeah. And I think so often we're asked to sort of change or reinvent who we are. But from my perspective, I've always tried to rather reinvest in myself as opposed to reinventing myself, so that I'm constantly learning, growing, and evolving. And that, to me, is about being an authentic leader. And I believe that leading with meaning is more possible through authentic leadership. And authenticity is tossed around a lot, I know.
Right, so what is it?
Right?
What does that mean?
And so to me, it's not a sort of a blanket that you wrap around yourself from the outside. It exists within you already, deep within, right?
So to the young folks out here,
It's be yourself. The world does not need an imitation of someone else. They need an original you. Do you. And that's difficult when perhaps others are asking you to be something else. You know, I have tried desperately to show up as myself throughout my life and career, and that has come with consequences, right? And so you have to understand that that will both be celebrated, but it may not be well received as well. But I think a part of my success has been trying to remain true to who I am and live it out as best I can, and be perfectly imperfect in that pursuit. And that's what I would encourage folks to do. You've got one life, you're one person. I think historically, we were taught in corporate, you know, this is who you are in a corporate sphere, and this is who you are and how you act and look personally. And I say tear those walls down. A part of leading with meaning is bringing those facets together. That, I think, has made me a better leader and a better human, and able, as I think about what it means to lead with meaning, to take a holistic approach to my life and career, right? And to do that by showing up, even with something as simple as braids, which for years in a corporate context would have been taboo. No C-suite leader would have dared to come with a natural hairstyle, let alone braids. And it was later in my career, I think it was around 2015, I was doing a business trip in Guatemala. And Bill, actually, he came with me. I think we were doing it with, UNICEF, that's right. See, he's a part of the act. This is what, right? This is, when you've been together for 34 years, you gotta, you know, all the things. And there are some interesting stories about Bill in the book. I won't give them away, but I encourage you to check them out. But I wasn't going to have time to deal with my hair, and so I decided that the braids that I often wore on holiday or vacation were coming to the business trip. And so I did it, but I didn't have time to go to Miss Ruby's, my hairstylist, very important person in my life, right? She's also in the book. And so I went into work. You would not believe the reaction. People so I was walking through the Great Hall. I was being stopped, stared at, calls coming in, texts, like they couldn't believe that a C-suite leader who reported to the CEO in 2015 would wear braids. And so the notes were, are you leaving the company? And it was spreading outside the company. So I was getting texts from people outside. I was like, my goodness.
that was around the same time that the Crown Act.
The Crown Act which was trying to provide policy that would do away with discriminatory practices around people, you know, the way they dress their hair, hair specifically. And so they said, aren't you afraid that you might get fired? And I said, look, after 25 years with a proven track record of results, which I clearly had, if braids were more important than my proven track record, then this would not be the right place for me to be. Then purpose alignment is off. And I would need to have a conversation with the organization about, you know, the lack of congruence, if that were the case. And in fact, I had this debate with another mentor, Vernon Jordan. And it seems like an odd thing to talk to Vernon Jordan about, who is, again, an icon in his own right, business leader, civil rights leader. But my conversation with him about it, which I do discuss in the book as well, was really about a risk appetite. And so often when you hear risk appetite in the business context, you know, you're thinking about, you know, what is the risk to the business? You know, how might you proactively do scenario planning around the risk to mitigate those risks so that they don't become detractors to achieving your goals and objectives. And in the book, I want us to flip that a bit and to think about a risk appetite for you. Like, what does it mean to have a risk appetite as a leader, personally and professionally, right? Because I think that is important as well, not just in the context of business risk. Although I nerd out, I kind of get into business risk and all the Gantt charts around it, the nerd in me. But in that scenario, I talked to Vernon about the risk and reward of not only going in, but keeping them. Because I didn't talk to him originally about that when I just showed up for work, because I didn't have time to get into Miss Ruby's. But as this thing was growing, I didn't do it to make a statement. I did it because I couldn't get in to get him out. But the more it came up, I said, gosh, now I'm feeling like a little challenge has been thrown. Like, I want people to be able to do their best work, to be their best, to lead with meaning, and to not have a barrier of a natural hairstyle or whatever else that might be get in the way of them being able to do the work. And so that discussion with him, we literally did some scenario planning. What is it that I thought might happen if I kept them? What were the possibilities? What is it that I hoped would happen? And what risks was I willing to take if I was going to keep them? If I was challenged and asked to take them out, what would I do? And would
it seems like there was so much thought put into something that most people, a hairstyle,
would never
just show up for, but you had to really strategically lead in that moment to
make a choice.
To make a choice and mean it.
And there was a board meeting coming up, and as an executive, I attended all of the company's board meetings as well, and some committee meetings, and then the next gauntlet, people were like, well, the board meeting's coming up. Surely you're going to take them out before the board meeting. And then I was like, damn, no. I wasn't even sure at that point I wanted to keep them. But it became a matter of like,
I don't think I've seen you without them.
Because I've had them for so long, since 2015. And I have to admit now, I think, I love my previous short, sort of Halle Berry cut. It was very sort of businesslike. I thought it was fabulous, quite frankly. Yeah. But this is also fabulous and easier. Mm-hmm. And so from a lifestyle perspective, because in my career, I traveled almost every single week for work, and did so up until the point that I retired. It was just a lot. Mm-hmm. And so this is, there's a lot more freedom, quite frankly, in it. But beyond the freedom, I like the uncomfortable conversation that it created, the stories and the calls of other people who said, if you can do it, that means I can do it too. And that to me mattered. And so it started out as one thing and turned into something that served multiple sort of purposes.
It opened a line of communication. And you often say, communication is often one-sided, that a lot of folks like to talk, not a lot of listening going on. But there are three kinds of ways to listen, and you break it down to an acronym. Mm-hmm. You call it WAIT.
Yes, I love WAIT, one of my favorite acronyms. And even in this, I remember talking to my boss about it, and he listened very carefully. But WAIT is, why am I talking? And I use that because I think communication, particularly as you're leading with meaning, is so important. Yes, finding and using your voice, very important, but also listening, the underrated skill in communication, really powerful. And so for me, it was really thinking about message, audience, vehicle, timing, tone, right? Like what message, audience, vehicle, timing, tone, also in the book. Like what am I trying to say? To what audience am I saying it? Understanding the segment. The vehicle, today there's social media, it may be in a meeting room, a large stadium, could be one-on-one. The timing matters too. Do I barrel in and say it right in the middle of the meeting? Do I, do it behind the scenes? There are lots of things to think about relative to timing, and tone matters a lot because as I think back in my career and my life, I would bull in the china cabinet, right? I'm coming in hot, wanting to be often seen and heard in spaces that were trying to, silence me or perhaps treat me as an other, and I just wanted to get to it. No BS, no sugarcoating, let's just work it out, have a healthy debate, problem solve, get to it, and keep things moving. When I transitioned from Chicago to Minnesota, where they talk about Minnesota nice, that style was not as appreciated. No, got a lot of feedback. And there's some fun stories about that feedback. I had a close colleague, Laura Sendell, God love her, and she would give me cues if I was like tearing up the place, right? And so one was the little ear tug, if I was giving it to people a little too hard and they weren't paying attention. And if I was still not paying attention, she would do the Rodin pose. That was our backup. And I was like, catch me. But I do think it helped me because I wanted my message to land in a way that it can be heard and received. Not just to be the loudest in the room, but to really make sure I can have the kind of healthy debate, civil discourse, uncomfortable conversation that allows that to happen. And the sort of three types of listening that I've leveraged have been, am I listening to fix? Am I listening to win? Or am I listening to learn and understand? And for me, trying to lean on the listening to learn and understand people's different perspectives, often even who they are as human beings, in addition to the problem they're trying to solve, what some of the barriers to that might be, has allowed me to gain insights that can be leveraged in pursuit, ideally, of a big idea, a big solution, an aha moment that allows us maybe not to solve it all initially, but to take another step forward. And listening, I believe, which is why I've used wait, why am I talking, to build trust. Because in the book I do talk quite a lot about the importance of culture, super important, and I think one of the most important things for a high-performing team is trust. And even in, whether it's with your team or in individual interactions, trying to build trust allows you to move through what will be inevitably challenging situations, right? And so leveraging not just what I'm going to say, talking, communicating effectively by speech, but listening, I would just offer up as something that is a muscle that we could all continue to build.
But you are saying that listening to learn ultimately grows into listening that wins and fixes.
I believe it does, but it's a shift in mindset.
Right, absolutely.
Because I'm super competitive, right? I want to win. I've always been very ambitious, but I want to do that in a way that is inclusive and is a team win and a shared win. And so it forced me to move from, this is March Madness season 2, like I'm trying to win. Like I want my bracket to be the best. I want my team to be in and all the things. But it wasn't the most effective solution, quite frankly, for me. And I think sometimes there's some gender imbalance in how those tools can be used, but for me, the listening to learn and to understand has been quite useful.
I loved how you have a partner who helps to bring your tone in concert with the room.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant tip.
Relationships.
Because relationships do matter. I'm curious because you talk a lot about habits and building habits, and so what would you and how would you recommend leaders who want to create lasting impact? What habits should they develop?
One, have a plan. I think so often we're going into things sort of haphazardly, and in Lead Like You Mean It, I talk about a holistic approach to your life and career. And that's about, being clear about what your purpose is and operating with integrity, intention, and humanity. It's nurturing trusted relationships, building that personal and professional board of directors, and it's championing yourself and advocating for others as well. And I think one of the best ways to do what you just asked about is have a plan, a life and career plan, both. So often when I'm talking to people, particularly in business, they have their goals and objectives for work. They have a development plan for the growth at work, and they have completely not thought about what that means in the context of their entire life. And so I would...
Life just happens.
Life kind of happens, it comes and goes, and these things do intersect. And so to push for a life and career plan, and to ensure then, too, that you're thinking about that over different ages and stages of your life. I'm able to retire from Target after 33 years when I was 56, when it was announced, 57 by the time I was officially done, because I'd planned for it. It was something that my husband and I worked towards, knowing that I retired from Target, not life. There were other things I wanted to do, but we had planned for that so that we would have more choice, more freedom, more agency, and knew what purpose meant and how we could then go about that. And the other thing I would add is, as my grandmother would say, there are a few things in life you do well by yourself. And so we took partners, right? Relationships are essential to our success and joy in life, and ensuring that I've had the right kitchen cabinet, which is what I call my personal and professional board of directors, has made all the difference in the world. The experts who could help me throughout my life and career think about, brainstorm, dream into the future, but also help me with real-time issues that I'm facing. And so you want to stock that kitchen cabinet with the right people in it. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. And it could range from the cheerleaders in your hype squad who are kind of lifting you up and giving you the energy that you need, but to the challengers who are giving you tough love and are really pushing you towards a growth journey. And people come in and out of your kitchen cabinet, so with intention, build it out, but nurture it. It's not static. When I was retiring from Target, I went back to that kitchen cabinet and thought about, what do I need now? What do I need at this next phase of life? Because everyone who was in it wasn't going to necessarily be the best suited for this next stage of my life.
What did you have, like monthly meetings? I mean, how did that look?
It actually varies. But what I am doing, though, what I did do and still do is did it with intention. Right? With a discipline. And so it varied by person. So think about Mrs. King, who was in my kitchen cabinet. We would probably formally meet only quarterly.
That often?
She and I did. Because,
wow.
We just had a very special relationship. But I also knew if there was something going on in between, like she was always there. Mm-hmm. We weren't texting.
Right.
Not texting,
phone calling.
Phone call. Or if occasionally when it was something really intense, I might fly to where she was if she was willing to allow me to jump into, something else that she was doing. I might come to her. And for others, it might be very situational. So for example, when I was beginning to think about joining corporate boards as a way to learn and grow while I was still a member of a management team, I was intrigued about the governance of for-profit companies, because I just think governance really matters. How organizations are run, the policies, the processes, the rules, governance is very important. And so I found experts in governance, people who were governance experts, and they became a part of my kitchen cabinet for that season. And I was very transparent, and we talked about this. They weren't lifetime appointments to the kitchen cabinet. One stayed on, but the others were transactional, but in a good way, because transactional is often bad. But I think transactional relationships with transparency can be good, because it was very clear, here's the skill, here's what I need, are you willing to do that? And so we are coming in and out of contact based on, if I have a current governance issue, I can certainly always call them up, but it wasn't like we needed a quarterly meeting to talk about those things. And so that worked out well.
I think for a lot of people, especially folks starting their careers, they think, okay, I go to school, I'm in the business of doing the work.
Yep.
I do a level of networking, but what this is like advanced
next level
sponsorship planning and
next level
learning on the job, and like how that is mapped out is both intentional, but it also, that takes a lot of work.
But it's worth it. You're worth it. And it was a muscle I built, and it became something I did really well that also helped me advance in the company. Like, still do have so many deep, meaningful relationships across sectors, across levels of expertise that I can bring to bear. And even my boss would say, like, I don't even know who you're going to call, and I know you're not going to tell me anyway. I'm like, no, because sometimes they're sort of clandestine, trusted relationships. I can't tell you all my business and all my secrets, but these relationships really allowed me to operate effectively and even operate at a level above what was often my station title or level.
Because you knew what was coming.
I got insights, I got trusted perspective, I got lots of off-the-record information that I could leverage, both in support of, helping the company or perhaps at times the nonprofits I was involved in, but also in service of benefiting myself as a leader.
To that point, I remember having a conversation with a CEO of a top 100 company. I won't give his name away, but I asked him, I said, who were your top two mentors? And he looked at me and he said, as one of the first, he was like the first African American of a Fortune 100, right? And I said, who were those mentors? And he said, you'd be surprised. I said, why would I be surprised? He said, because they aren't some big, C-suite exec. They aren't like some billionaire. They were the security guard and the cleaning lady.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
how?
Yeah.
He said, because, you tell me why.
Because they keep it real. They keep it relatable.
They know
They know everybody. They know everything that's going
They know
on.
what's coming
They know what's
in.
coming in. They know who's staying late. They know who's going home early. They don't even know all the titles of people, so they don't get caught up in that BS either. And my cleaning lady, Maria, because this is...
I had a Maria too.
I had a Maria, and I was so close to Maria that when my office moved, I would go over to the floor in a different building she was in just to keep up with her. Because I stayed late when I was traveling a lot, but when I was there, I was then late in the evening, and she came in late. So I knew her kids, and she did not speak great English, and we built up a really trusted relationship. And what I loved is she would bring in notes from her kids' school, and if she needed help, I would help her translate the notes, make sure she understood what the heck was going on. And then I went to talk to her boss so she didn't get in trouble, because then that would take time, and I didn't want that to get in the way of her doing her job. So I went to her supervisor and explained, she's helping me, I'm helping her. She would bring in tamales that she'd made. We'd sit, we'd work on the notes and do the things.
Wow.
And I recall when my last CEO boss, Brian, joined Target, he's like, who are some of the first people I should meet? And I said, Maria. He's like, who's Maria? She is the cleaning lady on this floor. I was with her before I left. I'm back on this floor, so now I'm back with her full-time here. You need to meet her immediately. So I'm like, if you can stay until at least 5, because that's when she starts, I'll bring her over. And I did. And that's leading with meaning. Like valuing, respecting, trusting, leaning in to everyone's perspective on the team, and not doing it in a way that is performative, that feels like, you're kind of doing them a favor. Oh, no. Like, she's doing you a favor, let's be clear.
Yeah.
And so I think when these relationships are at their best, you are both a student and a teacher, right? You're taking in wisdom, but you're also, sharing it, and that relationship is mutually beneficial.
You've known quite a lot of interesting people. You could name drop for centuries, I think, but
Maria's the best.
yeah, but one of them, and it's so ironic how there's a little bit of kismet, because I'm doing a story on an artist right now that airs tomorrow, and there's an intersection between her and Maya Angelou as well. So I've been saying Maya's name over and over again. But she gave you a useful piece of advice that goes into what you and Maria were doing, and that was that during a conversation she said, as long as I am here, I will be of use. And that resonated in a way that I think, like in this moment, in your retirement, I hate to call it that because you're not retiring.
No.
But how are you of use now?
Yeah.
And still flowing outside of what most people are thinking. Yes, you're going to travel. Yes, you're going to do the volunteer work that's important to you. But yeah, how are you being useful in that sphere that you've always been?
Yeah, great question. I was quite fortunate through a work assignment to get to interview her at her home in Winston-Salem. Wonderful opportunity. And she said many amazing things. I still have the original transcript that was transcribed from that conversation, and I circled those 11 words because they spoke to my purpose, which was to be of service. And she talked to us who were in her home, but then shared through this interview that, it's how can you be of service every day? And I do speak about, regardless of your field, when you're leading with meaning, in some capacity, you are being of service, right? And you just need to think about in what way I can do that. And, for, me, I've tried to be of service in lots of ways. And she was like, look, it's not just on MLK Day or a company-sponsored day of service. And so I came back from that thinking about how I could be of service in my work to the customers that we were serving, to the employees, which we called team members, to the communities in which we operated, to the shareholders. How was I in my work with intention being of service? How was I being of service to my family when at times I was off kilter? There's no such thing as balance. You're waking up every day trying to do the best you can, and I think over a lifetime, one tries to be, am I being of service to my family and my community in ways that are good? And so when I think about what I call, my friend Phyllis Siegel calls my second act, because I did retire from Target. That part I did retire from, but I am having a second act in a new season. And in that season, I first reminded myself, is my purpose still true? I want to be of service, and I have continued to refine that to want to especially be of service to women, to people of color, and other underrepresented communities as a part of that calling. And that then also helped me frame, because I think when you're doing a personal purpose statement, which there are some tools in the book to help you get at, you've got to think about, what is it that you want to do? What is the impact that you want to have? How does where you spend your time and energy align with that? Do the sort of people or other resources and capabilities required to bring that to life exist in a way that can support helping you get there? So I've thought about that in this next act, and I've been thinking about the next act by designing a portfolio for my life. So it's a portfolio approach where I decided before I was going to transition that I was going to write a book. I'd thought about it for a decade before. Life was too busy, couldn't swing it with work. But about 3 years before I was transitioning, I called my boss and said, you know what, I'm going to pick up that old proposal, because in 3 years, unless you fire me before then, I'm going to fire myself. And he's like, stop saying that. But that was true.
Do that again.
Stop saying that. Seriously, every time I do it, he would go like this, oh my God, why do you say that? I'm like, I'm just keeping it real. My philosophy was C-suite meets street sweet. That's how I describe my approach, right? C-suite exec meets street sweet.
And she really is. I mean, when I say it, you are the most down-to-earth C-suiter, and I meet a lot of them. But when they're not mean, what I'm saying is you never seem caught up in the hype.
No, don't believe your own headlines.
Don't
believe.
okay, I got to add to Shonda because she's another one. There are several, but
who I love.
TIA credit to Shonda.
CEO. She's amazing.
Yes, thank you. Duckett. But I think of that in the realm of how that has also been an aid in your ability to pivot.
Yeah, and that helped me. You want to stay grounded, you want to stay relatable. It's also, as my parents would say, good home training. But by saying that, my boss knew I'm going to deliver. I'm not going to not deliver on what is required of me, and he knew that. But I'm going to dust this thing off, and I'm going to get at it, because I would like then to be in a place where I've had a head start on it, so when I'm into this next chapter, that this can be a part of my purpose and my mission, which is helping others be their best and do their best. This wasn't to get fame and fortune, because I've also discovered you don't get rich making a book when you're an ordinary schmo like me. But that's not the case. I did it so that I could be of service at scale. I mentor and sponsor a lot of people, not just at my company, but around the country, and even some that are global. And I wanted to do more of it. It becomes a vessel to be able to help more people at scale. And so I had historically been a very private person, been more vulnerable in this book than I ever have been, but it's in service of a purpose, right? And there are very simple reflection questions in each of the chapters of the book so that the reader can say, interesting story, but what does it mean to me and my life and career? Or the person perhaps that you're mentoring and sponsoring. And I do think that's important. And if you're interested, I partnered with a global leadership development firm called Adeption. They do amazing work, including leveraging some really interesting AI tools that allow for more personalized, customized training and development for leaders. And so if they help with the reflection questions, but they also help me create some new free exclusive development content that is available on my website. So if you go to laysaward.com, it's free, available for you to use. And what it does is build off of the content in the book, but helps you take action, right? It's nice to read it, but I'm hoping that it allows you, when you're ready, or someone that you're partnering with, sponsoring, mentoring, that they then can take action and use the lessons in ways that benefit their life. And so it'll help you write the personal purpose statement. It'll help you take the next step to build that kitchen cabinet and to really think about the other concept I just mentioned around the strategic yes and the strategic no. How are you with intention deciding what you'll do and what you won't do? Because that is equally important, not just the yes, but what you say no to.
Describe the target audiences. Who is this book perfect for?
You know, that's a great question. We talked about this a lot, particularly I've been in consumer-facing businesses my whole life. You know, I'm like segmentation, like who's the audience, all of the things. And what we landed on was it is for people throughout different career and life stages. My editor and publisher were trying to force me to narrow it into one, because that's their job. And I, like many things in this book, pushed against, because I felt like if you're blessed, you're always learning and growing and evolving, right? I think when I'm leading with meaning, I'm a lifelong learner. You know, I'm curious, I'm adaptive. And so I wish I had this when I was in my early 20s, you know, one before I left the college campus, but certainly as I started out my career, and so certainly there is something in this for you. But when I was a mid-level manager, I could have used these tips, and quite frankly, I find myself going back to it now, at this season of my life, making sure that I am holding true to the tenets that I'm preaching. You know, am I still aligned with my purpose? Do I have the right kitchen cabinet? Am I being authentically true to who I am? I'm a grown woman, I'm 57, I'm still using it, right? But I could have used it when I was in my 20s as well. And so I think it meets you where you are, offers a welcome and safe space for you to explore where you are, and is a companion, I hope, that will be with you as you're moving towards where you'd like to be.
So for all the big fan girling and boying out there, by the way, because you look at all these people who showed up despite
Thank
Dr. Fauci
you.
away. What's the next big thing that Laysha Ward is into that's super exciting and that we'd all be really thrilled to hear about?
That's a great question.
I didn't prep you for this.
No, you didn't. And it's funny, like, I don't know whether you'll be excited about it, but hopefully proud of and inspired by it. A few things I might say. One is that when I retired a year ago, my husband, Bill, retired in July, the first week of July, so it was his Independence Day, little branding there. And the gift in that is to be able to, on our own schedule, find time to do things we'd like to do together, to ensure that as we're learning and growing, that we still like each other and want to hang out together. And we survived COVID, you know, when the whole world shut down. Both of us traveled every week for our jobs, and then all of a sudden, like every day, we were like, uh-oh, like, how's this gonna work? We didn't kill each other. Turns out we still like each other. Whew. And so to be able to spend time reconnecting, traveling, and being present for our aging parents. Bill's father passed first. My father passed 2 years ago. Very difficult for both of us. Both of our mothers are in their 80s and still alive, but the challenges and blessings that come along with that are very top of mind for us. And so to be able to be present for that is super important to us. I have been spending time on both nonprofit and civic boards, which matter a lot to me. And so I want to use my time, talent, and treasure there. And for-profit company boards, both public and private. I don't think enough women in particular and people of color are in leadership positions around those leadership tables, helping to shape company strategy, build and grow organizations, and in some ways, as a result of that, build intergenerational wealth. And so I am currently on the board of United Airlines, and about to transition off of Denny's Restaurant Corporation Board, where I've served for, some 15 years. I just joined a very small private company board. It's called Macro. It is a media entertainment company.
Oh, what? Howard University.
Grad, yes.
Grad,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, you know
A few
Charles
years-
King?
I've interviewed Charles
Oh, I didn't
D.
know that.
King. Yes, I have.
Anyway.
You name it, I probably interviewed them, including Dr. Fauci. Not sure they remember me, though.
But that's an amazing company. And I've had some other public company boards offers, right? Bigger brands, bigger comp, all the things. But back to being centered on your purpose, I'm sure my husband was like, what are you doing? What? We're going to give up what? And I said, I don't want to do those. I am aligned with the purpose of what Macro is going to do. Small, scrappy.
They're scrappy.
Scrappy,
Tell
small.
them what they do, because we have
Well,
17
we don't have much
seconds
time,
left.
but look them up. Macro, stay Macro, they do movies,
Denzel
film,
Washington, Lil
movies,
Denzel.
film, agency,
Yeah.
lots of interesting work, small.
Yeah,
But
small.
I will be
And a
able
great
to,
Oscar party, too, so now I know who to call for my ticket.
but I can lend my expertise there, and I've been to one board meeting, and I already could. Like, I
Yeah.
have learned a lot in my 33-year career at a Fortune 30 company, a lot. More than I even realized.
And she's going to share it.
And I'm going to share it, and they are going to make me smarter
Yeah.
as a result as well. I guess I'd close with this. At the end of the day, I think we all get better together. I really do believe that. The world doesn't feel like that now, but I do believe we will all get better together and should strive as we're leading with meaning to leave things and people better off than we found them. And I think the lessons in this book will help us all do just that.
Ladies and gentlemen, Laysha Ward. The book is Lead Like You Mean It.